Saddam Hussein. The name alone conjures up images of a brutal dictator, a man who ruled Iraq with an iron fist for decades. But behind the military uniforms and the stern pronouncements, there was another side to Saddam, a man obsessed with luxury, with surrounding himself with the trappings of wealth and power. While his people suffered under sanctions and his brutal regime, Saddam was living like a modern-day sultan. Now I know what you're thinking. John, dictators loving gold-plated toilets isn't exactly breaking news, and you'd be right, but there's something about the sheer scale of Saddam's opulence, the audacity of it, that I think is worth examining. This wasn't just a guy who liked nice things, this was a man who used palaces and riches as a way to project an image, to build a cult of personality around himself. And let's be clear, this wasn't inherited wealth. This wasn't some oil-rich prince who'd never known anything but luxury. Saddam came from humble beginnings, but he clawed his way to the top, and once he got there, he intended to enjoy every single perk. So, tonight, we're going on a little field trip, a tour of the palaces and excess that were Saddam Hussein's Iraq. Buckle up, folks, because it's going to be a weird ride. Imagine walking through halls adorned with gold, chandeliers that could rival those in the grandest of European palaces, and rooms filled with priceless artifacts. Saddam's palaces were not just homes, they were statements of power and control. He even had a private zoo, filled with exotic animals from around the world. Tigers, lions, and even rare birds were part of his collection, showcasing his reach and influence. Meanwhile, the average Iraqi citizen struggled to make ends meet. Basic necessities were hard to come by, and the disparity between Saddam's opulence and the people's suffering was stark. Saddam was known for throwing lavish parties, inviting dignitaries and influential figures from around the globe. These gatherings were not just social events, they were strategic moves to solidify his power and influence. His love for art and rare artifacts was another facet of his personality. He amassed a collection that included pieces from ancient civilizations, further cementing his image as a ruler with a grand vision. Security was paramount. His palaces were fortified with the latest technology and guarded by elite forces. This was a man who trusted no one and took extreme measures to ensure his safety. Propaganda played a crucial role in maintaining his image. State-controlled media portrayed him as a benevolent leader, a father figure to the nation, while dissent was brutally crushed. But as history shows, even the most powerful can fall. Saddam's reign eventually came to an end, and the palaces that once symbolized his unyielding power now stand as relics of a bygone era. Reflecting on Saddam's legacy, one can't help but wonder about the impact of his rule on Iraq. The scars of his dictatorship are still visible, and the nation continues to grapple with the consequences of his reign. So, as we conclude our journey through the opulence and excess of Saddam Hussein's Iraq, let's remember the lessons of history. Power, when unchecked, can lead to unimaginable excess and suffering. Thank you for joining us on this exploration. Until next time, stay curious and stay informed. Saddam's story begins far from the gilded cages he would later build for himself. Born in a mud brick village near Tikrit, his early life was marked by poverty and violence. His father, a shepherd, disappeared before Saddam was born. Raised by a brutal uncle, young Saddam learned early on the power of fear and intimidation. He joined the Ba'ath Party as a young man, hungry for power and eager to overthrow the British-backed monarchy. After a failed coup attempt landed him in prison, Saddam escaped to Egypt, returning to Iraq after the Ba'athists finally seized power in 1968. He quickly rose through the ranks, becoming the de facto ruler of Iraq by 1979. His ascent was marked by ruthlessness and paranoia. He eliminated rivals, consolidated power, and built a vast security apparatus to maintain his grip on the country. With each passing year, Saddam's grip on Iraq tightened, and his personal wealth and extravagance grew in tandem with his power. Now, let's talk about those palaces, shall we? These grand structures were not just buildings. They were symbols of Saddam Hussein's reign, each one a testament to his desire for control and his flair for the dramatic. Because if there's one thing Saddam Hussein loved more than power, it was a good, ostentatious building project. He was deeply involved in the planning and construction, often seen inspecting the sites personally, ensuring that every detail met his exacting standards. Across Iraq, he built an estimated 80 palaces, each one more opulent than the last. These palaces were strategically located throughout the country, serving not only as residences but also as symbols of his omnipresence and authority. These weren't just residences, they were monuments to his ego designed to inspire awe and fear in equal measure. The interiors were lavishly decorated with the finest materials, from marble floors to crystal chandeliers, each room a display of unimaginable wealth. Take the Al Fal Palace, for example. This palace was one of the most extravagant, a true marvel of engineering and excess. Built on an artificial peninsula in a man-made lake, this monstrosity boasted over 600 rooms, gold-plated bathroom fixtures, and a sprawling garden modeled after the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. The sheer scale and opulence of the palace were meant to leave visitors in awe. It was a monument to excess, a physical manifestation of Saddam's belief that he was the rightful heir to the ancient Mesopotamian kings. The palace's design incorporated elements meant to evoke the grandeur of ancient civilizations, reinforcing his self-image as a modern-day king. And the symbolism didn't stop there. The interiors were adorned with murals and artwork that depicted Saddam in various heroic and divine roles. Many of Saddam's palaces were adorned with murals depicting him as a conquering hero, vanquishing his enemies and leading Iraq to glory. These images were carefully crafted to project an image of invincibility and divine right. He commissioned portraits of himself in various heroic poses, ensuring that his image was everywhere, a constant reminder of his absolute power. Statues and portraits were strategically placed to dominate the visual landscape, making it impossible to forget who was in charge. The intricate designs and luxurious furnishings were not just for show, they were meant to convey a message of unassailable power and divine favor. Every detail, from the carvings to the furniture, was chosen to reinforce the narrative of Saddam's greatness. In the end, these palaces were more than just buildings. They were the physical embodiment of Saddam Hussein's propaganda, designed to impress, intimidate, and control. Through these grand structures, he sought to etch his legacy into the very landscape of Iraq. Section 4. A river of riches. But where did all this money come from? The answer lies beneath the sands of Iraq, in the vast reserves of black gold that have shaped the nation's destiny for decades. Well, Iraq, as you may know, sits on a rather large pool of oil. These oil fields have been the lifeblood of the country's economy, generating immense wealth. And as the country's sole dictator, Saddam basically treated the national treasury as his personal piggy bank. He had absolute control over the oil revenues, which he used to cement his power. Oil revenues flowed into his coffers, funding his lavish lifestyle and grandiose building projects. These projects were not just for show, they were symbols of his unchallenged authority and ambition. He used this wealth to buy loyalty, showering his cronies and family members with gifts and positions of power. This network of patronage ensured that his grip on the country remained unshaken. He funded elaborate military parades, showcasing his military might and intimidating his enemies. These displays were not just for external foes but also served to remind the Iraqi people of his dominance. And of course, he poured a significant chunk of it into those palaces, ensuring that they were outfitted with the finest materials and most extravagant furnishings. Gold-plated faucets, marble floors, and crystal chandeliers were just the tip of the iceberg. The Iraqi people, meanwhile, saw little benefit from their country's oil wealth. While Saddam and his inner circle lived in opulence, the average citizen struggled to make ends meet. Sanctions imposed after the Gulf War crippled the economy, leaving many struggling to afford basic necessities. The sanctions were meant to weaken Saddam's regime, but they ended up causing widespread suffering among the populace. But Saddam's extravagance continued unabated, a stark reminder of the disconnect between the dictator and the people he ruled. His palaces stood as monuments to his excess, while the Iraqi people bore the brunt of economic hardship and international isolation. Section 5. The price of opulence. This contrast between Saddam's opulence and the suffering of his people is perhaps the most galling aspect of his rule. While he dined on caviar and sipped imported champagne, ordinary Iraqis struggled to put food on the table. While he slept in a palace with gold-plated faucets, they lived in fear of his secret police. The human cost of Saddam's regime is well documented: the mass graves, the torture chambers, the countless lives lost to his paranoia and brutality. And while it's impossible to say with certainty how much of Iraq's suffering could have been alleviated had Saddam not been so obsessed with his own lavish lifestyle, it's clear that his extravagance came at a terrible price. His palaces, those monuments to his ego, stand as a testament to his warped priorities. They are a physical reminder of the human cost of dictatorship, of the way that power, unchecked and unbalanced, can corrupt even the most basic human instincts. Section 6. The walls close in. But like all tyrants throughout history, Saddam's grip on power wouldn't last forever. The walls of his opulent palaces, those gilded cages he built for himself, couldn't keep out the realities of the world forever. The US invasion of Iraq in 2003 marked the beginning of the end for Saddam's regime. He was forced to abandon his palaces, fleeing for his life as coalition forces advanced on Baghdad. Gone were the days of lavish banquets and military parades. Saddam was on the run, hiding in spider holes and relying on the loyalty of his dwindling band of supporters. His capture in December 2003, pulled from a hole in the ground like a common criminal, was a stark contrast to the image of the all-powerful dictator he had so carefully cultivated. The man who once ruled Iraq with an iron fist was now a prisoner, facing justice for his crimes. Section 7 Dust and Echoes. Saddam's trial and subsequent execution in 2006 marked the final chapter in his brutal reign of terror. His palaces, once grand symbols of his power, were left to decay, looted and vandalized in the chaos that followed the invasion. They stand today as empty shells, haunted reminders of a dark and painful chapter in Iraq's history. Some have argued that these palaces should be preserved as museums, as a way to educate future generations about the dangers and consequences of dictatorship. Others believe they should be demolished, their very existence a painful reminder of the immense suffering endured under Saddam's rule. Whatever their fate, one thing is certain: the legacy of Saddam's opulence is a complex and troubling one. His palaces, those monuments to excess, serve as a stark reminder of the human cost of unchecked power and the enduring allure of wealth and luxury, even in the face of unimaginable suffering.